The most important thing you can do to learn a foreign language through materials, standalone materials like video lessons or books that are meant for adults to teach themselves, is to learn the taxonomy of the deep grammar. That's what these videos are about. So we've already talked about this deep grammar, and we've talked about the clause and the clause as a subject and predicate. All right. The way to move forward is to focus on the predicate now. If we can really grab hold of this and understand it, it'll help us always identify the subject. All right. So the relationship between the subject and the predicate, I'm going to be doing a little bit of review here from the last video. It's reciprocal because one is defined by the other. But there are some things that are always at play with the subject and its predicate in a clause. Okay. The subject is always going to be linked to a happening. Okay. In fact, I'll be a little more specific. The subject is going to be linked to an historic happening. But by historic, I just mean it happens in time, an actual thing that happens in time. Now, this will help us find the basic clause, not the in any clause. And what I mean by that is sometimes a clause will get modified by modal words like if or when or which or relative pronouns or things that turn them into subordinating clauses. Okay, subordinated to another clause. So eventually we'll get to the point where we talk about how one clause relates to another. They could be equal in their meanings and as they operate to convey meaning, which we call coordinated clauses, or they could be subjected one to the other, the main clause and its subordinate or dependent clause, independent clause, dependent clause, together linked up in the collection of words that's before you by means of one of these subordinating conjunctions. So you might have other things at play within that clause besides just the subject and predicate, and we'll get to that later. But one thing to hold in mind as you begin to try to understand just the nature of a clause is that it's always going to have this subject. Notice I'm not saying noun at this point in that old sense of a person, place, or thing, right? But rather a subject that is going to be linked to an historic happening. Okay. This happening is going to take place in time. Now, let me get a word out there. Like, let's go for house. Okay. Now, that we don't know if it's a noun or a verb yet because we don't see it in a larger collection of words. So one thing about clausal grammar is you don't ever label the word. There are very few words that can be truly labeled accurately until you see how it operates with other words. Okay. So we're always going to be looking at collections of words. So if I say to you house, you really don't know if that's a noun or a verb yet, because the other collection of words I provide might be the house is big. Well, at that point, I'm just telling you that's the noun. That's a noun, the word house. But what if we say we need to house the refugees? Okay, or we house people. People passing through town that need a place to stay every now and then. Okay, so there I'm using it as a verb. You see what I'm saying? So this notion of a thing happening in time is going to help us understand the subject to verb. But we can't just say like house and then put a word that signifies time like yesterday or today or tomorrow. House tomorrow. See what I'm saying? That has a word in it that can serve, depending on the other words we put around it, as the subject of a clause, and it has this time aspect, but it's not a happening. You see what I'm saying? House yesterday, you're still going to be left with what's happened. What's the happening, right? So that's not what I'm talking about. That's not going to be a clause. Okay. The words that we really have developed in our progress of evolving our language or using our language, I do believe that it was programmed in us by a creator, but the origin of language is contentious, and there are a couple theories about how this comes about. But anyway, there are words we have in our language that are specifically formed. They have a function among others, perhaps, but one clear function of them is to be able to indicate places in time, right? These words can very easily indicate past, present, or future, whereas the word yesterday, although it does have a time aspect to it, can only indicate the past. You see what I'm saying? So a word that is truly functioning as a verb, okay, is going to be able to anchor down a subject in time, and it potentially can move that subject through time. What I mean by is it could be formed so that that word plus the subject can be past tense, it could be present tense, or it could be future tense. Okay, so every clause has a subject and predicate. Every predicate is going to have a verb, a main verb. If you can find the verb, then that's the great place to start. That's where you need to start. Forget the noun stuff, forget the subject stuff. You got to find the verb first in the clause to find the clause. And the verb is the word that you can use to move that happening through time. Excuse me. For example, the house was painted. The house is painted. The house will be painted. You see the word that moves this whole meaning from past tense, present tense to future tense. It moves it through time as the word is, was, will be. Okay, so that's your verb, is, in this case. Now, the other thing that every clause is going to have, okay, every clause is going to have a truth value. Okay, the simple clause, minus the conjunctions that you might put onto it. All right, the coordinating or subordinating conjunctions. The simple clause, the subject and predicate alone, is always going to have a truth value. So if I were to say yesterday the house, and then I tell you true or false, you might say, well, I need to know more. I need a predicate. I need you to tell me more. Literally, that's what the word means. Because you don't know how to assign a truth value to it. All right, but if I were to say yesterday the house was painted, then you could potentially put a truth value to that, verity or falsity, right? True or false. So falsity is also a truth value. You know what I'm saying? So a truth value is either the condition of being true or false. And clauses will always have truth value. They'll have time movement, and they'll have truth value. Now, if you can find that, if you can find the word that shows you the happening that moves through time. Now, what I mean, but I like to call it a happening because that's your truth value, actually. Did it actually happen? Will it happen? Is it happening? And you might think, well, how is that action, right? How is that the verb? Well, if you think about it, it really does cover all the bases. Like, I am sitting here. That's not really action at all, right? But it's a happening. You see what I'm saying? Because it is occurring at a certain point in time, and it's got the subject and the predicate, and it has a truth value to it because you can potentially assign it as true or false. Now, you might not have all the facts. You might not be at a position where you know for certain. But see, I'm not asking you as to whether you know it's true or false. I'm just saying potentially you can look at the group of words and say, yes, this has a truth value. I might not know what it is. It might be true or it might be false, but I can see it has a truth value. And if you were to say something like the elephant, the red elephant tomorrow, or the red elephant now, there's another time word. That's not the verb. There's no happening there, and there's no truth value there. Like if I were to say again, the red elephant now, true or false? You would need more information, right? Because that's not a clause. So the clause is always going to carry enough information to show the historic happening that has a truth value. And that's something that you need to think about for a little bit, and you need to take it to books or your language for the day or for a few minutes and to test to see if I'm actually right about this. All right. So let's do that before we move on to the next video.